I don't know what happened to me last week, but I just snapped. After 2 days without sleep, I lost my mind on a family member and crashed out big time. I've been overwhelmed for months, but the last 5 weeks or so, the stress has been kicked into overdrive. My anxiety and workload have been so high that I've barely been sleeping. You can probably see it in my eyes. Brain fog is starting to take over, just like it did when I was a chronic alcoholic, except now I'm pretty much sober. I've been trying to keep up with all my responsibilities, but it's gotten harder and harder because it feels like my brain is slowly shutting down. I'm sure a ton of you can relate, and that's why today I'm going to share my story with you of how burnout led me to have a mental breakdown. I'll also be discussing why burnout has become so rampant these days, what the signs and symptoms are that you should watch out for, and the potential consequences that could occur if you ignore them. As for the full story, I'll explain exactly what happened in a bit in all its gritty detail, but first I need to explain how it got to that point and why it got as bad as it did. My burnout process happened just like anyone else's would. It's a long, drawn-out downward spiral that leads to ever-declining motivation. This downward spiral occurs most often with people who aren't seeing the results that they're hoping for with their hard work. And they keep going and they keep going. Everyone says, you have to stick it out, never quit, never give up. I don't know about you, but I had a father figure in my life, my grandfather. I was raised by my grandparents. He would always say, Chadlet Maxing, don't you ever be a quitter. And if I ever wanted to skip out on something early, he picked me up and I was just screamed at all the way home. And when I got home, I decided to do some work, shoveling mulch or whatever to try and make some money here. And get this, I was only like 12 years old. He came out every 10 minutes or so to yell and scream at me and tell me how much of a quitter I was and how I'd never get anywhere in life because I'm such a quitter. And I don't know if you guys have had experiences like that with your fathers or whatever, but it really stuck with me. And at this point in my life, I don't know when to stop with something. I don't know when it's appropriate to cut my losses and move on to the next thing. And as a result, I've put myself in this position where I've been grinding and grinding and grinding for 6 years straight and not really seeing the results that I was looking for. So burnout doesn't really happen as quickly to people who see those small victories rather frequently. When you're building a small business or you're building an art career or just whatever you're doing, social media is a great example. If you aren't getting a post that gets that stands out every once in a while. If you're just having consistent failure after failure, regardless of persistence and continuous improvement, you're going to look at yourself and you're going to feel very demotivated. And it's going to get worse over time. You're going to doubt your own abilities when the reality is you likely just aren't lucky. And the problem is, as you know, our brains are built on this dopamine reward system. And that's why video games are built the way they are. So that whatever amount of work you put into it, progression is guaranteed in gaming. And that's why I believe gaming is so popular, because people live these lives where you can do everything right, work your butt off for years, only to watch someone much younger surpass you in a fraction of the time. I'm not saying that we need instant success in order to stay motivated to continue, but what you do need are small wins to help refresh your brain. Because as we all know, you're dedicating everything into investing in yourself and building a life for yourself so you can have a better future. Depriving yourself of rest, of relaxation. And when your brain consistently lacks those chemicals over the course of a long period of time, depression starts to manifest into reality. Another big part of staying motivated is confidence. Obviously, if you're like me and you grind your life away and you're reaching the age of 30, by the way, I talk a lot about this in my Anxiety of Being a 29-Year-Old Failure video. That'll be in the description. But if you end up approaching the age of 30, this major milestone year, knowing that you've put in all the work that should have resulted in reward, in progression. And you see other people your age who have made much more progress with much less effort. You start to lose that confidence even more. And that's when you lose that youthful energy, that feeling of, I can take on the world, that you have when you're a fresh college graduate. And as a result, we're less likely to want to try something new. And the lack of dopamine and brain reward chemicals leaves us in a situation where we don't even have the energy to do it, even if we wanted to. So it's a self-reinforcing cycle. Now, how do we define burnout exactly? Like, what kind of signs or symptoms would a psychologist look for? Well, last week I was really struggling with this sense of being completely overwhelmed, just wanting to give up on everything, shut my business down, and it was just an incredible burden just to try and get through each day. And it made me want to search up to see what kinds of experiences other people had online, on Reddit, for example. So I found this Reddit thread where this person was talking about their experience with burnout. But as you can see from this person's experience, burnout is mainly defined by the feeling of being overwhelmed by something that was once easy for you. In their situation, they were once a highly motivated and effective IT worker. They constantly pushed themselves to the limit, taking on projects, getting extra certifications and continuous improvement, until one day, the stress became too much for them. Their brain slowed down. Their executive functioning started to decline. So they tried to push through this overwhelmed feeling. And it didn't take much time before they completely broke down mentally. Burnout is our body's way of communicating to us that it's time to slow down, chill out, and take a rest for a while because we are not robots. And because this person didn't listen to it, it ended up destroying their resilience permanently. They now suffer from chronic illness, concentration and memory problems, and this stubborn brain fog that just refuses to go away, even if you happen to get a full night's sleep. As much as sleep deprivation plays a role in situations like this, it's not just physical exhaustion that we're suffering from, but a spiritual exhaustion. And as a result, this person ended up losing their job. And there were a few people who left comments under this thread who did a really good job providing some valuable advice and insight. One person here can attest that if you don't listen to your body and take that well-needed rest, the damage that it can do to your resilience and your actual mental brain power can potentially be permanent. And the longer you try and push yourself, the longer of a rest period you're going to need to recover from that. And no amount of healthy lifestyle or self-improvement books are going to keep it from happening. Because trying to push through it not only can lead to a major psychological breakdown, with your life completely spiraling and falling apart, but it can even push one to seppuku. So for this person's 4-year endless grind, this guy recommends that they take a 6-month break. Now, I don't know about you, but that's pretty damn long. I don't know how many people have the luxury to take a 6-month break for burnout, but to me, it's not realistic. Now, apparently, there are a lot of jobs out there that offer burnout leave. But if you're a self-employed person, that's not really an option for you. If you're in a situation like me, where you started your own business, everyone is constantly asking things from you all the time. There's always something. When you're in a position like that, the solution is not so simple. Social media plays a massive role in modern day success, especially for small business. And I think this culture of grinding where they punish you for taking a break, to me, that's a major systemic issue that honestly should be addressed in the form of regulation. Burnout isn't laziness. It's your brain overheating and shutting down. Speaking of social media and systemic issues, the flaws of modern society play a pretty big role in this culture of burnout that we're experiencing today. The expectations of what we're expected to live up to and accomplish by certain age milestones like 30 or 40. Many of the older generation still holds us to the same standard that they held themselves. You're expected to be able to move out at 18 and go out into the world and fund your own life and work your way up, eventually buy a house and start a family. Our parents and grandparents often judge us harshly for not being able to get a wife or girlfriend by a certain age. Personally, I don't have that problem from my grandma, but a lot of you guys, I'm sure you experienced that. Because the reality is, today's economy is broken. I mean, we've got one of the worst job markets that we've had since the great financial crisis in 2008, and it's quickly surpassing that. You add on top of that the worst inflation crisis since the 1970s, and in my opinion, it's even worse because we have the additional problem of reduced purchasing power across every sector of the economy. The only thing we got going for us these days is a strong stock market. All of this stock market growth is predicated in this new AI boom. And I think it's clear to a lot of us who have critical thinking skills that the super rich are just trying to capitalize on this situation and cash out and make a quick buck, leaving the rest of us high and dry when the bubble pops and the stock market inevitably crashes. Part of the reason so many of us suffer from burnout these days is because our brains are programmed by our parents for a different time, a time when hard work and perseverance all but guaranteed results. But these days, this system no longer rewards hard work. It rewards luck, privilege, and nepotism. It's more of a deterministic caste system than anything. And if you don't have luck, if your family doesn't have connections, and you're also short or unattractive, I'm sorry, you're in for a rough ride, my friend. It's a statistically proven fact, now more than ever, that height and attractiveness are the number one determinants of success. You can spend your whole life kissing up to your boss, working harder than everyone else, putting in the hours, pushing yourself to the point of breaking, and watch some tall guy walk in from out of nowhere and take up your position with a fraction of the effort. Why? Because human beings are naturally programmed to see people we look up to as leaders and superiors, and people we look down on as inferiors and followers. And the powers that be have a vested interest in reinforcing that hierarchy and even exacerbating it over the course of generations, which is something I talk about in a lot of my other videos. So we're in a situation where the upper class has literally everything, and everyone else has nothing. And you're still told that you should follow your dreams and that the American dream is real. Follow your heart, put your all into your life, and eventually you'll succeed. And there are some opportunities that we have now in the modern day that they didn't have in the 80s or 70s. Opportunities that can potentially even the playing field for short guys like me. Unless you're ugly, of course, but that's a different matter. And that opportunity is social media and online entrepreneurship. And there's nothing more satisfying and fulfilling than being able to build a successful online business or content creation career that allows you to be your own boss, set your own hours, become some kind of micro celebrity, and feel pretty damn cool about it too. It's the kind of thing that makes it a lot easier to get a girlfriend. Because as a short guy, if I just worked a regular 9 to 5, women aren't gonna care. They're still gonna see me as a loser and a nobody. So what's the goddamn point? I'd rather make poverty wages now with the potential of becoming rich and famous later than just give that all up for a stable 9 to 5 and become a wagey for life. And nowadays, it's very clear that those kinds of jobs no longer have stability. But you see, there's a bit of a problem with the creator economy and online entrepreneurship. All of the effective avenues for marketing, for building an audience and a small business and a following online have all been consolidated into just a few platforms. And as these big tech Goliaths have muscled out the competition over time, They've cut cost. They've made the user experience worse. They've outsourced customer support and moderation to an AI that has no idea what it's doing and makes constant mistakes, destroying people's lives and businesses left and right, banning accounts here, there, and everywhere that did nothing wrong. On top of it, we're in the late stages of a social media content creator gold rush. Almost every niche has been flooded and saturated, and with the onset of AI, the problem has just gotten worse. Meanwhile, a lot of these platforms have become pay to win. You got every other post going by being an ad, and the platform pushes celebrity posts that already are rich and famous over and above people that you actually actively followed. So as time goes by, it's getting harder and harder and harder to succeed and grow an account on these platforms. And these big tech platforms know how much power they hold over our daily lives. They know they hold all the leverage, and they're using it and abusing it. And it's become increasingly clear that modern social media is more of a slot machine than anything else. You can do literally everything right and still never get anywhere. Meanwhile, the most garbage, unoriginal slop content will rise to the top of your For You feed, get 300,000 likes, and launch that person's career. And if you are like me and you've been on the losing end of this luck-based game of social media, of trying to climb the social ladder, and you've witnessed that unfairness firsthand, then you can understand as well as I how a system like that contributes to a culture of burnout. Now, burnout will start slow, and it builds and builds over a very long period of time until one day you'll lose it and explode at somebody. And that's exactly what happened to me. So as I described in my anxiety of being a 29-year-old failure video, this all really started in 2019 when I was working real hard in college. I got myself a good office job. The office job lasted a couple years, and into lockdown, I got laid off. So I decided to start my own business. And over the course of from 2020 to now, it has been one long series of unfortunate events and bad luck. Every time I think I'm starting to make progress, something comes along and tears that all away. And it eventually reached a point earlier this year, around February or so, where I came to the conclusion that my small business had no future unless I can build my own audience that cares about me, that wants to support me, that can help provide me with a livelihood where I can be free and independent and climb the social ladder without having to bend to the will of our corporate overlords. Now keep in mind, this channel had been a long time coming. I started planning this out way back in 2019. I probably won't run out of video ideas for quite a long time. But the reason I hadn't started it yet is because I had been working so hard on my business and it hadn't been growing as much as I wanted it to. And with as much work that I had been putting into my business on a daily basis, nonstop for 5 years, I could not see myself adding a YouTube channel on top of that, let alone a TikTok in addition. But then I started to think, hey, I'm going to be 30 in like 1 year. There are kids 10 years younger than me doing this, and I'm going to lose my youth and no longer be relevant unless I get started now. And if I wait too long, the whole goddamn global economy is going to collapse, or we'll delve into war or famine or something. And I began to realize that this YouTube channel idea may be the only legacy that I can leave behind to immortalize my message and my wisdom for future generations. Because I'd been getting so depressed in the last year or so that I was starting to wonder if I would have it in me to even persist beyond the age of 30. And if that's the case, I got to get started now. So I did. And it has been the most difficult thing I have ever attempted to do in my entire life. And the running theme of my life of consistent setbacks, continuous problems, continuous disappointment, lack of progress, lackluster results, that theme carried over into my content creation career as well. I have had no end of constant technical difficulties to the point where it's almost supernatural. And over the last 8 months, it has grinded me down to a nub. All that gaming footage that I got from Fallout London, that was all recorded in May and June. I haven't played a single video game since late June. And that was the only thing that I did for fun. So it's safe to say, I've been working nonstop on my business, on the channel, on the TikTok, etc., without even an hour of free time to do anything other than eat for the last 5 months. And just like the person in that Reddit thread who described their brain slowing down, their ability to speak being hampered, things that were once easy to them becoming difficult, I've been experiencing the same thing. Recording this video right now has been a nightmare. I can't rant like DBDR. I don't know how the hell he does that. It takes me hours and hours and hours to record because my brain isn't as sharp as it used to be. I don't know, I forget what I'm saying. I don't know what I'm going to say next. My entire vocabulary disappeared. So I was already experiencing a sharp decline in my mental health come September. And something would happen in October that would kick that decline into high gear. Some major, major bad news. And this was on top of having seen my grandma have a stroke a month before, have my TikTok account banned and just barely get it back, and be the only sane person of sound mind in our family within 500 miles that was able to do anything to help save her life. So yeah, I was already worn out come the end of September. And the performance of my channel had taken a major downturn after I got monetized in August. If you take a look at my views graph here, it has been a consistent downward trend for the last 9 weeks. So I already had enough on my plate. But what would happen in October would just absolutely push me over the edge. Now, I won't go into specifics, but my business was built around age-restricted, regulated products. But all that has recently started to change, big time. A stronger, synthetic, more concentrated version of my product came onto the market a couple years ago and completely disrupted the industry. And this other product has a lot of potential risks and problems. And I knew from the start, and I told all the stores that I worked with, all the people I know, that this new product is going to put a target on our backs. And that's exactly what started happening in October. There were a bunch of high-profile cases of some very negative outcomes that resulted from this product. I won't go into detail, but these boomer lawmakers and the general public aren't willing to take 5 minutes to learn about the difference between this product and my product. And the media has taken this and ran with it, lumping us all together as if we're all the same thing, and all businesses that provide either product are all equally as dangerous. There was no law that was voted on. There was no grace period. Just an immediate emergency action that put me in a situation where not only could I lose my livelihood, but I could lose my freedom as well. And every night for that first week of October, I was panicking. I talked to everyone I knew in the community, everyone I knew in the industry, to try and figure out what we're supposed to do here. And nobody knew any more than me. It was terrifying. I went to bed every night wondering if I was going to get my door kicked in or something. So with the help of a fellow advocate and activist who is actually pretty big on TikTok, as well as a few other friends that I have who are advocates, we all organized together to speak out against this injustice. For an entire 2-week period in October, there was one county after another, one city after another in California that was putting an ordinances on the docket to ban outright all of these products. I had to sit there listening to these old hags rattle on for literally 5 hours, all in an attempt to convince these old men at the city council to take away the one thing that provides me what little livelihood I have, and the one thing that I use personally to help me get through the miserable slog of my day-to-day life. And I can say proudly that every last one of those ordinances failed. Now, even though we were victorious in our efforts, that 2-week political campaign really sucked it out of me. I lost so much sleep. It took so much energy. It set me so far behind. On top of that, I'm having to come to the realization and accept the reality that it's a very high likelihood that I will just have to shut down. So coming off the back end of that exhausting, demoralizing experience, we were getting ready to celebrate my grandma's birthday come the end of October. And my uncle came down to visit from Seattle so that we could all go out to eat together on Sunday. And unfortunately, that weekend was when my insomnia decided to come back full force. Ever since 2018, I would have these insomnia episodes where I would struggle to get more than 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night for literal weeks. Now, as you can imagine, I was already stressed to the max without the sleep issue. So all of a sudden, when the insomnia episode returned for the first time in a year last week, it was like a nightmare became reality. It all started out with me having to work so hard, so long hours to keep up with all this stuff that I only had like 6 hours a night to lay in bed to sleep. And previously, I was able to sleep most of that 6 hours every night. But I reached this point where I even had less time to sleep. So I remember Thursday night last week, I only got 4 hours of sleep. So I was already feeling pretty crappy Friday, but I can function pretty well without much sleep. But the problem starts to come when mental rest deprivation builds and builds and builds. So that night, my uncle arrived on Friday. My uncle and I, we've had our disagreements in the past. I'm a very cautious, paranoid person. And one of my strengths is foresight. And that foresight is a major burden because I'm able to see all of the potential ways that something could go wrong. So what I like to do for my family and for my life is to make whatever preparations I can for those events to minimize the likelihood of those negative outcomes occurring. I'm also very effectively able to set priorities. You know, my grandma, her cognition is declining. She can't remember things. My mom is severely mentally ill. I'm the one that keeps things stable around here. And my uncle only comes around once or twice a year. He doesn't realize how many problems I prevent on a daily basis. So he sees me and my paranoia and my precautions, and he gets annoyed. But you see, ever since August, when my grandma had her stroke, and I was the one who was here to witness it, it was traumatizing, by the way, and I was the one that took decisive action. I made sure she went to the hospital, even though she fought me back every step of the way. I was the one who saved his mother's life, who saved my grandmother's life, my closest loved one, who witnessed her lose touch with reality and start speaking in gibberish while he was off living his life. And I'm here holding down the fort, making sure that his mother is safe and making sure that the home that he's going to inherit stays well kept. And after that stroke back in August, I called him, I talked to him about it. He came down for the emergency. He talked with his mom. We all came together as a family, and he showed deep love and appreciation for what I did. And I finally felt that my paranoid personality was finally being appreciated. But it kind of seems like I was wrong about that. So that night, Friday night, I was working until like 1 a.m, packing bags for my products, all with the knowledge that I was going to have to get up fairly early the next day on Saturday and do my 19, 20-hour content creation marathon, hoping to God that I would be able to get enough sleep. But boy, oh boy, was I wrong. I laid there in bed, tossing and turning. For those 6 hours, I only got 1 hour of sleep. And I remember getting up, and I posted it to my community post too. I felt like absolute hell. But I knew that I had no choice. I had to take my ADHD meds, and I had to get working. I had a commitment. If I wanted to stay and keep up with that weekly upload schedule, and I was able to surprise myself. By the time I got going, I had the momentum throughout the day. I was feeling pretty normal come about 6, 7 o'clock. And I was able to have a really cool, interesting, fun conversation with my uncle that evening. Just felt like we were getting along really well. And the plan was the next day, Sunday, we were going to go out to dinner with my grandma, driving to a city about 40 minutes away to go to a nice restaurant. Of course, I still had a shit ton of work to do on Sunday that I was going to have to fit into before and after the outing. But I had faith in the idea that night, okay, I've been sleep deprived for several days. I've been averaging 3 hours of sleep a night all week and 1 hour the night before. I must sleep tonight. It's almost a certainty. And to my utter shock and horror, the same thing happened again. Now, you might blame the ADHD medication, but you'd be surprised the vast majority of the time I take it, I sleep just fine. But that night, I don't know what it was. Something was different. But that's how it goes with these insomnia episodes. No matter how tired I am, no matter what supplements I take, I can't sleep. And the crazy thing was, usually I end up falling asleep in my chair or something, come around 4 a.m. And I also have some caffeine around 12:30 in the morning when I do those 20-hour work days. But that night I didn't even use the caffeine, and I felt more wired than ever. I worked until 6. So there I was. I get up at noon. I go upstairs to have my tea, and I break the bad news to my grandma and my uncle that I got an hour of sleep again, and I feel horrible. But I wasn't in a really bad mood. In fact, I was kind of being lighthearted about it. But of course, I'm standing in the kitchen trying to make my tea and my drinks for an hour and a half because I can barely think and I'm constantly forgetting what I'm doing. And eventually I see that my uncle and my grandma are working on some home improvement project. And I forgot to add that was also occurring the day before. And that's one of the things I really appreciate my uncle for is he is a great handyman and he helps out so much when he's here. And one of the things that really stressed me out the day before was he had pointed out that my mom's bathroom, the same one that he uses when he's staying over, the guest bathroom, the toilet was literally leaking from where it is on the floor. And he showed it to me and my grandma, and I looked in there, and the tile floor is all cracked around it, and there's water seeping through, and he went and checked down under the house and said that the wood is soaked and it's dripping all the way through from the goddamn toilet. I mean, that's disgusting and terrifying at the same time. So I remember having seen that on 1 hour of sleep the day before and just thinking, oh my God, why is this happening? Because my mom, she's very obese. She's severely mentally ill. She has all kinds of rituals and strange, unpredictable behaviors. And I can only assume that she was sitting on the toilet, moving around in a way that she shouldn't be moving. And I mean, she damages stuff all the time. So I see that and I'm panicking, not only because I'm worrying about how much damage that this could cause to our house, but I'm also panicking because my mom has horrible hygiene. If she's standing in a room and leaves, her scent will fill the air for 20 minutes straight, and it is gag-inducing. She wears these long, unsanitary acrylic fingernails that probably have some biohazard tissue on them from when she's wiping, and nothing smells worse than when she goes to the bathroom. And I was completely having a panic attack thinking, oh my God, on top of everything that's on my shoulders, I'm going to have to deal with having to share a bathroom with her. But thankfully, my uncle was able to fix it that day. And that Saturday, my reaction to the situation, my suggestions, that was the beginning of my uncle becoming annoyed with me. Because on that day when that happened, he suggested that we should leave a heater in the room running all night long. And I was like, okay, that makes sense, but I hope it doesn't start a fire. And he was like, no, it's not going to start a fire. That doesn't happen, Chadlet. Space heaters don't start fires. And I was like, well, actually they do. I've actually witnessed a space heater catch fire before. So he rolls his eyes. Obviously, he's annoyed that I upstaged him or whatever. So I decide to go into the garage, grab the fire extinguisher, and I take it and I set it in a strategic location that would allow me to be able to grab it if there is a fire coming from the bathroom. And he tried to push back against me about it. He's like, we don't need a fire extinguisher. And then I say, well, if there is a fire in here, the flames will block our access to the fire extinguisher. And he's like, all right, whatever. But I didn't think much of it. I was busy working on my content. But the next day, after the second day of 1 hour of sleep, that's when he would push things a little bit too far. And it's interesting, because that night before, when we had that nice, pleasant conversation, I was able to educate him and tell him everything about what I was doing with this political activism stuff. And at the end of that conversation, he came away understanding me a lot more. He said, wow, it's no wonder you're so stressed out. It all makes sense now. So that's why I was so shocked the next day when he approached me all confrontational, knowing that I had just gotten 1 hour's sleep for the second night in a row. So what happened was I was watching him and my grandma try and fix this lamp. And what he was going to do to try and fix it was to switch it to one of those clap lamps. And I don't know about you guys, but I fucking hate these clap lamps. We had another one in the living room, and it was so unresponsive that we just unplugged the damn thing and stopped using it. And the idea that the only other lamp in the living room was now going to be an unusable clap lamp like the other one when it was just working a few days before, it made me a little bit upset. Especially considering that lamp is one of the few things that allow my grandma to be able to see when she's walking down the spiraling stone staircases that are an absolute hazard for someone her age. All the while that they're turning this lamp into something completely useless, she's walking up and down the stairs in these 6-inch wedge heels with her arthritis-riddled feet hanging off the edge of them, hanging out at the very top. And I'm just standing there like looking at her like, please don't stand there, Grandma. Like, those shoes are such a hazard. It's an unnecessary risk. I don't want you to fall. And she did listen to me. She actually put on some tennis shoes. But between that and me kind of whining a little bit about how the lamp was just working, but I was trying to be reasonable because I know how irritable he gets when I am like that. So I tried to be subdued, but apparently it wasn't enough because I'm standing in the kitchen, I'm eating grapes, I'm peeling up a pomegranate, I've got a serrated knife in my hand. On top of that, I'm completely depressed about the fact that my previous 2 TikTok videos had both been complete flops, even though I had spent 6 hours working on one of them, 4 hours on the other one, and my last 8 YouTube videos have been complete disappointments. And here comes my uncle behind me while I'm sitting there minding my own business in the kitchen. And he raises his voice and says, Chadlet, you're like the boy who cried wolf. You turn everything into this big emergency, and it's gotten to the point where I just ignore you. I just tune you out. And when a real emergency comes, well, you're going to be out of luck because I'm not going to listen. And, normally if he would have said this to me, I would have come up with some diplomatic answer to say that was logical and calm and reasonable. But this time, it was like some kind of demon took me over. I turned around, I looked him in the eye like this, and I had a knife in my hand too, and I could not control myself. I was yelling at him at the top of my lungs, and because I was so sleep deprived and my brain was barely functioning, I could barely even think of the words to say. I was really struggling, but I managed to say something like this. Keep in mind, I was screaming. I started out giving him this psychotic smile. I was like, oh yeah? All right, that's great. You go ahead and do that. Go ahead and do that. Because the next time something bad happens with Grandma, you go ahead and you try to ignore me and see how it goes. See how that plays out. Because I'm the one person here keeping things together, keeping things from falling apart on a daily basis, on the grind of the day-to-day. I'm the one who's on the front lines of this family, keeping this household and keeping your mother safe on a day-to-day basis, while you get to go off and live your life. And he was just looking at me like this. Not saying anything. And I had this overwhelming compulsion to take this knife and do something that I would never be able to take back. and do it right in front of him. And there was just this tiny, tiny voice of reason in the back of my head that said, you know what? That's probably not the best idea. So instead of misusing the knife, I set it down and continued my tirade, screaming at the top of my lungs about how everything I try to do in my life fails. And I'm approaching the age of 30, still living in my childhood room next to my mentally ill mom who makes my life a living hell. And it was at that point that I proceeded to completely lose control and began to repeatedly slam my head against the cabinet, full force. Bam, 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 bam. And fortunately, he had the good sense to back off and not raise his voice anymore and to just say, I understand. I got it. I just wanted to make an observation. And after that, I just felt so just ashamed and misunderstood and alone and alienated. Like, I thought he understood me. I thought he understood what I had gone through, On top of that, I felt completely awkward as hell because I knew that later that night, we were all going to get together in the car and go out to eat. And to be honest, I was considering not going. But then I realized that, hey, this could be grandma's last birthday for all I know. I'm not going to let that awkward situation get in the way. And believe me, that dinner was awkward. I felt like he hated me now or something. I felt like I destroyed a relationship and my mind wasn't all there. But yeah, regardless of how ashamed I felt, how little eye contact I was able to make, it still ended up being a pretty peaceful evening. And I appreciated that my uncle laid off, realized that I was losing my mind from lack of sleep and burnout. And to be honest, that explosion from earlier in the day had kind of been a long time coming in a way, because there had been some resentment building on my end toward his reaction to my precautionary measures and foresight over the last several years. Because I feel like my precautionary measures and foresight have prevented this family from suffering disaster after disaster that I see coming that he doesn't. And it's incredibly frustrating that the entire burden of preventing these catastrophes is falling on my shoulders. And it really, really makes me want to put him in a position where he has to see what it's like without me and realize how much I was holding things together. Because the problem with religion, and don't get offended, I grew up Christian, but a lot of religious people just assume that God's just going to protect them from everything and they don't have to worry and they don't have to think. And as a result, they do a lot of really stupid things and take a lot of unnecessary risks that could have very dire consequences that could have easily been avoided if some basic foresight and thought was put into things. And in a sense, I feel like I've been parentified in a lot of ways because of that. And as a result of a complete lack of sleep for days and days and days, there was literally no filter holding back my unbridled emotions. Now, after hearing this story, after getting to know me a bit, a lot of people might think, damn, bro, you should get some therapy or something. But there are some major problems with therapy for young men in our day and age. Modern therapy and psychology feels like it's structured towards the benefit of women. Behaviors and thought patterns that are natural for men, that always have been, are demonized and viewed as problematic and issues that need to be resolved. The vast majority of therapists out there are female, and there's an obvious bias towards other females. Most of these women are leftist feminists. They hate men, and be very careful because one phone call and they can take away your freedom. So it's important to find a male therapist if you're a guy. But a lot of the male therapists are bad too. I remember one of the male therapists I found a few years ago, the first thing he wanted to do was talk about politics and how much he hated Trump. And it's like, what kind of fucking therapist are you to sit here and create a potentially hostile environment for someone who could possibly disagree with you? So it can take a while. But I finally managed to find a therapist who was based. And I talked to him about this burnout issue all the time. And we've come to the conclusion that I'm basically between a rock and a hard place. And what I mean by that is basically if I don't find some way to reduce my workload and, reel back on all the things that I'm doing, the consequences could be permanent. Like they said in that Reddit post, my ability to think and function could be handicapped for the rest of my life. And I'll never be able to achieve the things I want to achieve. But at the same time, because of the burnout and because of the massive workload, I feel like I don't have the time or energy or brain power to even figure out what I can cut out of my workload. I mean, it's a scary prospect. I've spent 6 years building this small business, and I'm in a position of analysis paralysis. I could stop selling my main product, which is the one that the California government has been clamping down on, but I'm also not so sure about that either, because I'm already like 90% of the way to matching the regulations and standards that they're probably going to put in. And even though I'm 90% of the way there at this point, I feel like I don't have the energy or strength to even go that last 10%. But if I don't, then I could potentially be missing out on a really prosperous future, because there are a bunch of small businesses in my industry in this state that won't be able to meet the new standards. The amount of competition is about to drop significantly. At the same time, like I said earlier, it's going to really stress me out constantly worrying if I'm not meeting the regulations somehow. I mean, I don't have a legal team here to protect me. I can't afford that crap. And last time they proposed something like this and it failed, they were wanting us to pay thousands of dollars a year to some kind of state department for a special license to operate. And I make little enough money as it is. So if they require the payment, I'm done. As far as cutting back on the content creation goes, these social media platforms are built in a way where if you take a break, you will be permanently handicapped. Your reach will be done. I have painstakingly built what I've built, just like my business, this YouTube channel and the TikTok, from the ground up. It almost feels like I put in just as much work in the last 9 months into this channel as I had in the last 5 years for my business. The difference is the business has made me money and all of this stuff hasn't yet. But this stuff has the potential to make me a lot more money than the business did. And it's also the one hope that I have of escaping this shitty situation that is my life. So the idea of reeling back or giving up on content creation feels like complete and utter defeat and failure, because the business doesn't really have a future. And seeing this channel stagnate for so long, the longer this channel's stagnation goes on, the more hopeless I feel. And the more hopeless I feel, the less energy I have. A lot of regular conventional jobs offer burnout leave. The kind of thing that I'm doing does not offer burnout leave. So I can either take the time to heal and recover while losing everything I've worked so hard to build, or continue building with the hope that something catches on so that I can get the dopamine reward that I need to give me the motivation to keep going and put off this burnout. The trouble is with burnout is that making a decision this difficult feels almost impossible when you're this drained. And both me and my therapist were just stumped when it comes to coming up with a solution to this problem in my life. And we both decided that the best course of action for me to take now is to put that decision off. Just to keep going business as usual with the videos, with the business and all of it. Just trying to figure out, whatever I can on the way, how I can, reel back on my workload. But the idea is that I persist until January comes so that I can see what kind of new legislation California is going to be putting on in the Senate. And at that point, I would make the final decision on whether or not I will stop selling that particular product. And if I do, I'll be losing over half my income. The other idea is I'm going to take a big, massive vacation in a couple years, a year and a half. It was originally going to be spring of 2026. My plan was to go to the Netherlands for 6 weeks. I want to go to Montenegro too, the two tallest countries in Europe. See if I can organically meet a tall woman who might find me attractive, like who isn't an escort, and just, stay in an Airbnb, explore the whole country, basically just put the business on pause. Because I've been saving money this whole time. I barely spend any money. And hopefully I can last, but I don't think I can go on the vacation in 2026. I wanted to do it for my 30th birthday, but I want to go over there at a certain time of year when the tulips are out. And I'm just 100% certain that I'm not going to be able to finish making videos on all the topics that I have to make videos on before I go. Because the problem is, after I go on this trip, I'll have spent such a massive amount of money that I'm going to have to reassess everything about my future by the time I get back. And just in case I end up coming back and deciding that there's no hope for me or no future for me, I want to make sure that before I do that, I'm finished making all these videos. The problem is, I don't know what the next year and a half holds. My grandma's health could worsen. The economy is probably about to get much worse. People all over the world have invested massive quantities of money in these companies with the idea that AI is going to be a revolution like the Industrial Revolution and change the world and all this stuff. According to a lot of smart people, this whole situation is really reminiscent of the dot-com bubble in the late 90s, early 2000s. Plus all of the inflation and all the other shit that we've been dealing with. It's a recipe for 1929 level Great Depression shit. So I know I won't be able to complete my goal until 2027. But at the same time, 2027 is the time that they're saying that everything's going to collapse and that the AI bubble is going to pop. So I'm in a very difficult position. I need a break, I need a vacation, but when I take one, I'll be coming back to a business that's completely dead. I'll completely lose my ranking on Etsy. My bank account will be drained, and after that, we are in for a bleak economic future. And if I wait till 2027 to finish all my videos, that bleak economic future or health problem with my grandma might come into my life early and I won't be able to take my trip. And that trip was the one thing that I wanted to do to complete my life. And of course, the longer I put off my vacation, the more likely I am to be permanently burned out. So one of the symptoms of burnout that I forgot to mention earlier is it does a number on your libido. And I'm really concerned about that because at this point in my life, my libido is 15% of what it was in 2019. But I'm increasingly worried because I've gotten a lot of tests, everything comes back normal, that this libido issue, it's not a health issue for me, it's a psychological issue. My body has been in fight or flight mode nonstop for years, and it has worn me down. When your body's in that mindset, it redistributes and redirects energy towards parts of the body that are meant for basic survival, as opposed to reproduction. And it has robbed me of one of the best things in life. And that is the rush that you get, that feeling of passionate lust and desire. It used to be so strong, and now I barely feel it. So if I'm going to try out some escort maxing in Europe, I either got to find something, some kind of medication that's going to help me, or I better get over there soon while I can still enjoy it even a little bit before my sex drive is gone completely. And I actually made a full video about that topic of how it feels to have low libido, and I'll include that in the description as well. But, after posting about my burnout experience in my community posts, there have been a lot of people in those comments that really just seem completely blind to the reality of burnout. You know that these people who push this pick yourself up by your bootstraps mindset are mostly boomers and stuff like that who, when they grew up, everything was still pretty good. Now, I'm not sure if these people in my comments are boomers or not, but the idea is that someone who says this kind of thing is going to be somebody who hasn't experienced that kind of hardship in their life. Like, first of all, after experiencing what I've experienced, I will have sympathy for someone going through burnout forever for the rest of my life. I mean, this shit is brutal. It is absolutely cruel to call exhaustion laziness. So as a result of everything we've discussed so far, all the societal factors and economic situation, male burnout and burnout in general in the younger generations has become far more common. And I think it's very clear why. We're having a consistent lack of return on time and energy invested. Like I was saying earlier, when the brain doesn't receive reward chemicals from little successes and progress along the way, like a video game does, then we lose motivation and feel like there's no point. Short men like me, especially those who are insecure, are suffering from this problem more than any other demographic. Not only do we get all the blame for all the world's problems and called an incel and demonized and marginalized, all of our problems are ignored, dismissed, minimized, but we're also expected to still be confident and still perform at the same level in everything as everybody else. And we're shamed, of course, when we fail to meet societal expectations. It's a game we're rigged to lose, especially since we have zero chance with 98% of women out there. One of the only reasons to toil and work your life away traditionally throughout history for a man was to find a woman and have a family with her. But, even if you do find a woman, you've still got the problem of finding a place to raise a family. How are you going to be able to afford to provide for the family? All of that has become harder and harder and harder. And it's so exhausting that you just kind of just want to kick back and chill, So of course a ton of men are choosing the neat lifestyle, not in education, employment, or training. But you kind of reach this point where you feel so fucked over and alienated by the rest of society that you just want to lay down and rot. Why should we be the gears of a machine that provides a life of pleasure to the privileged few by exploiting this underclass at the expense of any potential we might have to climb the social ladder or lead a better life for ourselves? Yes, the odds are still there, but they're getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And it's hard to find meaning when you put faith in your higher power, and every time you turn around, your life gets worse and worse and worse, all while this rich, tall bully over there has everything you could ever dream of in life and lords it over you and abuses you. What meaning is there in that? Unless you're a masochist like me. Burnout is what happens when effort leads nowhere. And I think I hit that wall. If you've experienced burnout yourself, I'd like to hear your story in the comments. I think you'll find a supportive community of people on my channel, including myself. We've all been through some shit, at least most of us. Anyway, if you liked this video, you'll like my video about the anxiety of being a 29-year-old failure, so check that out.